The next topic, and actually the last topic in this part of the module, is self-regulation. And how you attribute your successes and failures is really intertwined with your self-regulation skills. When we're thinking about self-regulation, we're thinking about making choices in behaviors, emotions, doing the right thing, figuring out how to make a task enjoyable, and making learning more effective. So basically figuring out how to do the things you need to do in a fun and effective way. And we can think about different capabilities that relate to this, like impulse control, delayed gratification, emotional regulation, we talked a little bit about in the last module, setting goals, and also self-motivation. And there are several developmental trends that have been identified in terms of self-regulation. We know that self-regulation can happen along different areas. You can have cognitive self-regulation, behavioral self-regulation, and social self-regulation, and these happen simultaneously, the development of them. We know that children use talk as a way to develop their self-regulation, and they increasingly talk more to think their way through different situations. Additionally, they're going to gradually internalize external rules to help them be successful. And as they go through a task, they're going to start making judgments on how well they're doing the task. And as they start to make these judgments, it's going to happen more and more until they're consistently monitoring their progress. Willpower also relates to self-regulation. Very young children tend to have very little willpower, but it builds up during early and middle childhood as they're able to sustain attention on doing tasks. But as we've seen with other things, there's a dip in adolescence. And you can think back to our module on physical development, and understanding what's happening in the brain might help explain this dip in willpower in adolescence as well. And so when we're thinking about these developmental trends, it really leads us to understand how to approach promoting self-regulation with children. For example, in preschool, we might want to help children plan ahead and encourage them to evaluate, because they don't do that on their own. Throughout development, we might want to monitor desirable behaviors and provide children with choices in what they do. We can also help students assess themselves and evaluate their own work, for example, by providing a rubric or a set of criteria that indicate that they're successful. And this last one might seem a little counterintuitive, but letting kids struggle is important. And when things don't come easily, there's a need for self-regulation and for that planning and that talking through and the figuring out what to do when you're not successful. And so letting kids struggle is important to help them develop their self-regulation. And we can also think about specific skills that can be developed to help promote self-regulation. This includes self-monitoring, for example, being aware of how often you do something. And we can monitor both academic and social behaviors. So how often do I study for a test versus procrastinate? How often do I read my textbook every night? How often do I do my practice problems and then go back and review them? And it can relate to social behaviors. How often am I going out with my friends? How often am I initiating a contact versus waiting for somebody to contact me? How often am I interrupting people when I'm talking? A second skill is self-instructions. That relates to that talking yourself through how to approach a situation in an appropriate way. Having this skill is also especially important with kids who have poor impulse control. Self-motivation is all about staying motivated when you're doing a task that's not really fun, but it might be important, or it might be hard, but something you have to do. And so understanding how to identify and appropriate goals that they need to complete the task for is one way to approach this. If you have a clear goal for why you're doing the task, then that helps improve your motivation. Um, and helping kids understand why they want to complete the activity is a way to help them improve their self-motivation. You might also want to help them see ways to make it more interesting or fun, including maybe giving themselves a reward, although we do need to be careful with that. And finally, self-evaluation is understanding how well you do at things, and kids are notoriously bad at this. They tend to view themselves as more successful than they actually are. And this can have some good benefits because it means that they're likely to persist in challenges because they think they can do it. But it's also detrimental when they have this overinflated view of themselves, because they'll see themselves as being successful when they're not. And so they might not put forth the effort that they need. And so giving students criteria to judge and guide their accomplishments is important, as well as just giving them the opportunity to do it. Think about in school how often kids are given a chance to evaluate themselves versus the evaluation always coming from the teacher. And an important part of promoting self-regulation is also helping kids understand how to delay gratification. And there's kind of a seminal study that goes along with this called the marshmallow study. And it was done by Walter Mischel, who is an Austrian-American psychologist. He is still alive today. He was born in 1930. And it was a pretty simple task. He gave preschool children a marshmallow, and he set them in a room alone with the marshmallow. And before leaving them, he said, "Here's a marshmallow, you can eat it." And that's totally fine. But I'm going to go out of the room and come back with a second marshmallow. And if that first marshmallow is still here, you haven't eaten it, by the time I get back, I'll give you that second marshmallow. So eat one now or eat two later. And he saw that the children who waited had had a different profile than those who did not wait. And the waiting was correlated with a lot of different characteristics. For example, these children reported feeling more competent. They scored higher on SAT scores. And they also indicated that they had better impulse control as adults. And he followed these children for a long time. He actually might be following some of them still, in their 50s. And this was a really important study that got people thinking about how to teach kids to delay gratification and why that might be important. Because when you delay gratification, you're going to have more intense focus on what you need to be doing instead of just what the reward would be. I've posted an optional video. It's actually from Stephen Colbert's old show, The Colbert Report, where he interviewed Michelle, who was promoting a book about the marshmallow study. I think it was like the modern marshmallow study or something like that. And there's also a video with examples of kids doing the marshmallow test. And I actually think these videos are really cute because you see the different tactics that some of the kids use to distract themselves from the marshmallow. And you also see some kids who are not quite as successful. And it is important to know that in that video, you're only seeing the actual marshmallow test. You're not seeing any of these other variables that he found correlate with it. Like the higher SAT scores, for example. And then there's one more thing that I posted relating to this marshmallow study, and it's an article from Vox.com where somebody has recently tried to replicate the marshmallow study, and it calls into question the strength of the results that Michelle originally reported. And I think it's an interesting read because it shows how we don't always take the time to replicate studies, and we might be taking the initial results and just kind of running with them without thinking like, maybe we need to be a little skeptical, or how strong are these results? And so by posting this article, I'm not saying that children should not learn how to delay gratification, but I am saying that we need to be skeptical of research and always questioning and updating what we know about child development. And so it's just an interesting read that I put up there as well. So at this point, I'd like you to pause again and go back to our Moodle page and think about, as a teacher, how would you address a student who said that they failed a test because they were just dumb? And how would you address a student who failed a test despite studying really hard? So you might want to think about different ways that they are attributing their successes and failures, and also think about what this might have to do with their self-regulation. When you're done with that, come back and finish up the last little bit of the video. So in this lecture, we talked about attributions and self-regulation. And the important thing to understand for attributions is that these are the powerful stories we tell ourselves to explain why we succeeded or failed at something. And this has an influence on motivation. And some of these stories are more beneficial than others. And the good news is that they can be changed if we understand the source of the attribution. Also, when it comes to self-regulation, it's important that we think about making wise choices so that we follow productive paths, because that's really at the heart of self-regulation. And this isn't something that comes naturally for most people, so it's something that has to be learned. So when you're working with children, think about providing them with that explicit instruction to develop these skills. Understand that sometimes things are hard and they actually learn by doing that. So letting children struggle is actually beneficial and part of their developmental progress toward developing these self-regulation skills. And also providing children choices in what they do and encouraging them to challenge themselves will help them develop self-regulation skills as well. So that's it for this class. We have a whole week off for fall break, so I hope you have a fun and safe break. If you're traveling, be careful while you're on your travels. If you're staying here, I hope you have a great time here in Amherst. When you come back, there's a total of 5 classes. 3 of them will be content classes. We'll have 1 review class, and then the very last time we meet will be our second exam. And so we'll start talking about that exam when we get back. But for now, I just hope you all enjoy your break.